one day at a time.
It's that real this time around. Lock and load.
Get on your knees.
This is the point of no return. I can never go back. Life without parole, upstate, shackled and trapped. Living in the hole, looking at the world through a crack. No coming back, like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me.
Nobody is illegal. There's not a. Can you explain to me how nobody is illegal?
It's a stolen land.
It's
So,
stolen land.
yep. So when we say this, the land that we are on is stolen by the indigenous people, and the indigenous people would say that no one is illegal.
But the indigenous people warred with each other. They weren't sovereign.
Huh? But they
weren't
weren't
sovereign.
illegal.
I know, but they killed each other.
Your point being?
That it wasn't a sovereign nation, and that the union of 13 countries formed a country. So, I mean, there isn't a Western democracy in the world that would just allow anybody in without due process.
You can ask the natives around here what they would say, because they would say it's totally different.
Appreciate your time. Why do you guys are against ICE? What's the opposition to ICE?
I'm just pro-love.
Pro-love? I'm pro-love too. Yeah, we have a lot of homeless people on the streets that aren't getting the care that they need. You know, without census data, I mean, how do you feel about that? That we can't really track everyone that comes here
I think we need to
and
address
provide
mental
resources.
health. Resources for mental health.
Appreciate it.
I was here earlier with my son, and we were like on a high coming from the downtown protest, and then we came here and someone told him to watch out because they were shooting rubber bullets, and it's just heartbreaking his whole life. Like, this has been fucking it. Like, this is it. And it's just
So the ICE side of it is heartbreaking. Watching ICE or the protesters?
ICE. Like, this is fucked up. Like, this is not what it's supposed to be. Like, this is not it. Like, it was fucking time for this shit. Like,
Well, how do you feel that, you know, there's 12 million people in here undocumented, and we don't have them vetted? I mean, I have no problem. I love immigration. I hire immigrants left and right, but I think, you know, I mean, there's no other Western democracy that allows them to just come in unvetted and undocumented.
I think there's humane ways to handle things, and the way that this shit is going is not how you do things humanely. Like, rounding people up like fucking animals is not how people deal with things. Like, this is not.
So let me ask you this. How do you feel about voter ID laws?
What about them?
Well, every country in the world, like if I go to Mexico, I have to show ID to vote. If I go to Canada, I have to show ID to vote.
Yes, I think you should have to show ID to vote.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
What do you think about Trump overall and his jobs on the economy?
I think he's a fucking asshole, and I hate everything about him.
Well, you don't have to like him as a person. I'm just mean from a
I
policy
think
perspective.
everything about his policy is rock shit. I think he knows nothing about anything about policy.
Do we have capitalism or crony capitalism?
So, think about it like this, right? The minimal necessary definition of capitalism, right, is a privately owned economy. So any aspect of our economy that is privately owned is capitalistic. And then any part of our economy that is publicly owned is, well, you could call it isn't necessarily socialistic, because it could be still like indirectly owned through capital as we have currently, right? Where rich people own the government, right?
Yeah.
So you're correct in saying that currently we have crony capitalism, but the problem with capitalism is that there is no way to regulate rich people because they're above the law.
Yeah.
They decide what the laws are, right?
Agreed.
So long as rich people exist.
Plutocracy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a plutocracy,
Yeah.
right? So long as rich people exist, they will be above the law. They will get to decide what legislation gets passed, what gets repealed, right? No matter how well you regulate them, it's just speed bumps on the road to oligarchy, right?
Yeah.
On the road to plutocracy, right? So, that's what we have. It's the inevitable outcome of capitalism, crony capitalism. Whether or not you call it the truest form of capitalism or not, it is, because it is a privately owned economy, right? But I guess, in a sense, if you want to be semantic about it, though, right, you could say that it stops being a privately owned economy when the rich people have as much power as they do, because then who's the real government? The rich people, right?
Fair enough, yeah. So, but how do you feel about the Federal Reserve?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Federal Reserve is one of central banks, one of Karl Marx's staples to, it's part of the Communist Manifesto.
A centralized banking system, yes.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean, wasn't Henry Kissinger that said if you control the food, you control the people, you control the energy, you control the continent, control the money, you control the world? Henry Kissinger said that.
If you control the food, you control the world.
Yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
could
either
control all-
they're all
it doesn't make
they're all
you-
pathways.
Right,
But my
you
point
can't
is
eat
that
money.
Soros, he's got a heavy hand in in a lot of this as well. He's funded some of this event, so that's where I get confused about the oligarchy argument. I don't disagree with it, but
No, I
I
mean,
feel like it's okay on
none
one
of
side.
us, so the George Soros thing, I'm surprised you believe it if you even know what plutocracy means. So none of us here know who the fuck George Soros is. None of us are being paid. That doesn't make any sense, right? George Soros only has like $2 billion or something like that. If he were to pay all of the people that are claimed to be paid by him, he would be completely bankrupt overnight, right? Like he doesn't have enough money to do that. That doesn't make sense.
Why does Nancy
It also-
Pelosi always hang out with his son?
I don't know. They're friends. They're rich people. They're both evil. I don't care.
Yeah, okay.
Like I hate Nancy Pelosi. We're not Democrats here.
Okay.
Yeah, we hate the Democrats. We hate the Republicans because they're all just serving corporate interests, right?
Yeah,
There's
100%.
only two parties in this country.
Yeah.
There's the rich and the poor,
Yeah.
right?
There were some vigilantes like Ross Perot who was rich and he was trying to, because my whole thing is what I'd like you to opine on is, China's place in the world. Clearly they want to be powerful. They want to undermine U.S. interest, and they don't have any freedom or discourse in their
Oh no,
society.
yeah, it's horrible. Yeah. Well, I mean, saying horrible. I'm not a huge fan of the way that China works. I don't like any authoritarian government, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the fact remains that like life in China for most people isn't fundamentally different than it is for us here.
Yeah, I know, I understand that. Yeah,
Like the vast majority of Chinese people just live normal lives.
yeah,
So like, it feels dystopic and terrifying, but like their surveillance state isn't that much better than ours, or like better, like more.
yeah. We have Palantir. I get it.
Yeah, and ours is getting worse. So like, yeah, it's they're also they've had the same form of government for the last fucking 5,000 years, right? It's just an emperor and their ministers who directly control the
Yeah.
entire economy, right? There's a common misunderstanding that a centralized economy is socialism, but that's not true. A centralized economy is one of the parts that can be one of the parts of socialism, but socialism, specifically democratic socialism, right? Which is democracy plus a publicly owned economy, right? It is not a centrally owned economy as with China, right? It is a centrally planned. In other words, everybody votes on how the economy should work for their regional area or for the national economy, right? And then that is organized by people who know how to do that. That's all it is, right?
So, where are there examples though where social? Because I mean, Lenin, it was
Authoritarian.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. It's always turned into authoritarian.
Exactly.
What is Pol Pot? Is Lenin?
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Idi Amin. All the same. Where is it thrived socialism?
There's the only example that we had of a democratic socialist country was in 1956 in Hungary, within the Soviet Union, right? There was a democratic socialist revolution. They tried to have a democratic socialist parliament, right? But the USSR came in, they drove tanks in, they killed everybody. Because, they aren't actually socialists for the people. They just wanted to control everybody, right? So, like, when we talk about, like, fucking Lenin or, like, Marxist-Leninists, I hate them. I really, really dislike them because they have made it so easy for the Red Scare to be, like, factual or, like, have more weight, right? Because if you talk about communism now, the meaning of the word has changed from what it was originally, right? Which is just how words work, But originally, communism is supposed to be fundamentally democratic, and it started off that way after the Bolshevik Revolution. Lenin tried to implement democratic decision-making processes, but he disagreed with the decisions of the Democratic Party or the Democratic process. So he said, "Oh, sorry, I'll do the correct answer for you instead," and then it went downhill from there.
So who would be the arbiter? And I genuinely ask this, the arbiter of because it seems like all power begets power, and all those who obtain power are afraid to lose power.
Exactly.
So how does it not become corrupt upon itself, knowing the human psyche, and that we're just primates with?
Exactly, right? We're just stupid animals, right? So there's a lot of different hypotheses for this. My personal favorite one is called a wealth cap ratio, right? Basically, people in positions of power. So imagine a wealth cap ratio is like where the richest person in an economy can't be more than 10 times wealthier than the poorest person, right? And the people with the important jobs that would normally be seen as having low social status, such as like a sanitation worker, would actually be in the highest wealth bracket. And the people with powerful jobs, like politicians or whatever, or like bureaucrats, I should say, they would have the lowest wealth bracket, right? Because you need to balance our stupid monkey brains, right? people who are going to be in positions of power will have that motivation, and there needs to be that psychological barrier preventing us from becoming too obsessed or too fucking megalomaniacal, right? And maybe it won't be enough, but it is like fundamentally, there have been studies on fucking how people behave in power structures, unsurprisingly, right? And it turns out that is, at least in small scale over short periods of time, it works very well. And to give an example of how valid that can be, if you just give somebody a head start in playing a game of Monopoly, you just give them more money than the other people playing the game of Monopoly, you can then look at an fMRI of their brain and then ask them, do you think...
I've seen it. I've seen it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, do you think you won because you had a huge advantage at the start, or because you played the game well? And everybody says, because, oh, well, I played the game well.
Yeah, I've seen those studies.
And you can see in their brain that they become like more psychopathic. Like they lose the ability to properly empathize with other people, right?
Yeah.
It's like really crazy.
So I have two more questions. The founding of it was 13 countries, a minimum viable product. Obviously, mistakes were made, but then you had, slavery dissolved. You had the women's suffrage movement. You had the civil rights movement. Well, I mean, there was it was an experiment that evolved. So, initially we did not have the entrenched bureaucracy, the deep state, things like that. The military-industrial complex. So, in other words, post-World War II, the presidency looked very different than it did pre-World War II. Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. So do you think the entire experiment of America was wrong from the jump, or that somewhere it became corrupted as a result of what you're alluding to in the monopoly experiment?
Rather than saying it was wrong at the start, it's that circumstances have changed. The world is very different. I mean, personally, I would say there was a lot more wrong at the start than there was right, but that's like relative to modern times, right? At the time, it could be argued that the republic, the United States that was a republic, right, a democratic republic, was relatively progressive, right? It wasn't perfect. It was extremely racist. It was extremely elitist too, right? The people who wrote the Constitution, the vast majority of them were elitists. They were rich people, right?
Aristocrats.
Yeah, they were wealthy merchants who wanted to be able to own the country individually as merchants, rather than have a crown telling them what to do with the economy, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
So, but as far as like whether we're successful or not, I mean, clearly it was successful in some way. We're the most powerful, wealthiest country in the world for now.
And there was a lot of upward mobility in the 19th century.
In the 19th century?
Yeah, the 18th and 19th century. I mean, that's when, the Rockefellers and the Carnegie, a guy like Carnegie came here, right? And was able to establish, not saying they're good or bad, I'm just saying that people were able to obtain resources.
Upward mobility.
At the top, at least anyway.
Yeah, when we say upward mobility, though, that's like, it implies that it was easy for many people, but in fact, systemically, it was a tiny handful of people that did, right?
Yes.
So, like, as a whole, like, nationally, in terms of, like, race, like, what percentage of the population had any upward mobility, it was a negligible portion.
Yes, of course. But Rockefeller obtained more wealth, right, but adjusted for inflation than anybody, than, like, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Elon Musk.
I didn't know that.
Today. If you look it up. So...
Yeah.
Per dollar basis. So what is the solution? I mean, in terms of discourse, because what's interesting is that if you talk to people on both sides, they generally want the same thing.
Exactly.
And yet nobody communicates, and the people in power seem to maintain this Hegelian dialectic.
Right. So the rich people who control the fucking government, directly or indirectly, however you want to spin it, they continue to try to divide us and convince us to blame anybody but them, right? Anybody but the people with power. They will tell us to blame immigrants, right? They will tell us to blame trans people. They will tell us to blame fucking Republican or like conservatives or fucking progressives or liberals, whatever, right? They'll tell us to blame all of the other poor people, right? And it's very easy to do that because people are looking for an enemy. But everybody knows that we have one common enemy, and it's rich people. All we need to do is have a national democratic vote. Do you want rich people to continue to exist? The vast majority of people will say, no, we can't allow this anymore. They always ruin democracy, right? And starting from there, we can do, because that's a relatively radical step, right? Because they won't agree, right? If they do agree, that's great. If they agree to divest completely, that's great. We love that. But they probably won't, in which case they will be criminals, right? Because even if the legislature refuses to pass the law that everyone votes on, like, I dare them, right? If 80% of the country says, hey, it's illegal to be rich now, are they really going to say, oh, no, Are they really going to do that? That sounds like a pretty bad idea. I don't think they're going to.
Is there any competition at all in the system, like where people can get to a certain? In other words, like you're capped out at a certain amount. You know, it starts the percentage starts to get higher once you get over.
So have you ever heard of economic democracy?
No.
So economic democracy is when all of the major industry and like the majority of the wealth in the economy is like publicly operated, owned and operated in a more directly democratic way, right? So the example I usually use is a mining town, right? In a mining town, if it is a privately owned mining company, then you have they own the entire economy of the mining town, right? Like literally. If the mining company goes away, or like the mine shuts down, the entire fucking town collapses, right? And in that way, they directly control the politics of the town because they control the wealth, right? There's no meaningful difference between economic power and political power, right? So, if then you were to have the mine isn't owned by one person or one corporate fucking entity, right? Or no fucking private equity company or whatever the fuck, right? But it's instead just like part of the economy, like similar to how a fucking library is, right? Just like the library is just part of the fucking the politics of the town or the fucking government of the town, right? It's just a service that everyone has and people work at, people maintain it, or like with sewage or previously electricity.
Would ownership be a solution? Like John Stuart Mill believed in worker cooperatives, but was initially for socialism and then changed his mind. He was like kind of in the middle, where he wanted to basically create a utilitarian system where liberty was maximized, but yet there was innovation.
So people like to innovate, right? So the idea that capitalism is like good for innovation is wrong, because in this world, I guess, the global capitalist economy, we have planned obsolescence, and like the objective is not to make things that are good, it is to make things that are profitable, right? So they make things that break quickly and that we need to keep buying, and they will charge us the highest possible price for the lowest possible production cost. And that means they're going to do things that are very harmful for the planet over and over and over because it is profitable, right? They will destroy us all because they need to in order to exist, right? So the idea that it is like good in terms of innovation is just false, right? It is not profitable to cure someone quickly and cheaply. Obviously, you want them to be like the hospitals, the fucking medical industrial complex wants people to be as sick as possible for as long as possible. They want them to stay in the hospital and keep giving them money, right? Because that's profitable, right? That's what the medical industrial complex will naturally do in a profit-driven economy, right? But that was just a tangent of the original question, right?
But not inaccurate.
But the original question was private ownership. The problem again with private ownership is the private accumulation of power, right? If you are allowed to just get infinitely powerful to infinitely wealthy, then you become an oligarch, right? We can't allow that. But with a publicly owned and democratically informed industry, right? Like, I guess to finish the explanation, right? It isn't just like if you were to have like a union, like a really good union or a democratic workplace, like a worker co-op for the mine, right? Then it would be an oligarchy of the miners, right? The people who work at the mine would then own the economy of the town, and the people who live in the town, despite the miners needing the economy of the town, right? They need grocery stores, they need barbers, they need fucking bars, whatever, right? They need everybody else in the town in order for the mine to exist. They need each other, but the miners would have all of the power, right? So instead of that, it's just everybody gets to vote on whatever is pertinent to them, right? How much of the profits of the mine goes to investment for disasters or like whatever, right? It's just part of the resources of the town instead of the resources of the mine.
How much immigration would be allowed in that system? Because the people, right, you have to provide resources for everyone in that system. So you need some type of production to raise the standard of living to care for everyone, or at least some good census data.
We have the opposite problem at the moment, right? So currently, at this point of capitalism, every individual worker is able to produce so much profit for like the amount of labor that they provide that it is no longer profitable to exploit us for our labor. There are no longer enough jobs. We have been needing to create fake jobs for a long time now, right?
Post-labor economics.
Exactly, right? So we have, and now we have AI that have very rapidly demonstrated that like a whole fuck ton of the jobs that we used to like the fake jobs we used to fucking fill in dead space have also become redundant now. It's become so much more profitable just have a stupid robot do it. And even if the robot does it shitty, it does it so much cheaper than like 100 different humans could do it, right? So we're at that point now, right, where it is not possible for capitalism to function because individual workers, the labor that we provide, is no longer valuable enough to the labor market. No one, like, we don't have enough labor value for all of us to receive money. The economy will collapse, right? There's no one to keep the economy afloat if no one has money to spend, right? 60% of the United States economy is service-based, right? So when it comes to immigration, it doesn't matter. Like whether or not someone is from this country or a different country, if we had higher birth rates in this country, it would be the exact same effectively as having a higher immigration rate, right? And everybody knows that having higher birth rates is almost always good for a country, unless your country is like, has more people than its economy can handle, like what happened in China a while ago, right? So yeah, immigration is such a non-problem. It's
I'll
just...
close where I started. Do we have to, because you just talking about post-labor economics, the Federal Reserve maintaining the dollar, it's not backed by anything, it's fiat currency. Obviously it's backed by the military. So the solution is the Federal Reserve a part of the system or not part of the system? I'll really let you go after this, promise. Getting hungry.
I mean, by Federal Reserve, it depends what you mean.
No, I just wonder because a lot of libertarians, they feel the Federal Reserve is at the heart of it, obviously going up the gold standard.
No. The Federal Reserve, I mean, in the way that it currently exists, I wouldn't like it.
It's
but
privately owned.
Right. A centralized, publicly liable, right, publicly owned central bank is necessary, right? Having private banks is insane, right? They are directly profiting off of all of the wealth that we have accumulated, right, and taking it for their own. They are making investments with our money, right?
Yeah, it's inflationary, and it deprives the working class and the middle class of their wealth.
Yeah, they literally control the economy, directly or indirectly, again. But,
no, but this is really great. Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
This is really great, interesting. Yeah,
Good talk.
have a great night.
You.